Okay, this time we are talking about what are we talking about, Katsu?
Witches and witchcrafts.
Witches and witchcraft. Funny thing was, for a long time, I thought only a woman can be a witch, or the term witch only refers to women, which is not legit. Not the thing. No, it's men can be witches too. Equality, right? Right there.
Yeah, equality, bitch.
Yeah, basically. So witchcrafts. Do I start with the first thing? Right, the
Yeah.
first thing's mine. Witchcraft had, in my opinion, two different stages in Europe. It was a pre-religious type, pre-Reformation thing. Most of you history nerds, if there are any, know what I'm talking about. If not, it's basically when in Europe, everyone decided the Pope is boring, so they made their own religions. You know, Protestantism, Anglicanism, Hussites, and all those sexy bastards. And that happened about the 16th century. So there's the pre and the post stuff, like witches before and witches after. Before, they're basically super simple healers. They're really into just keeping knowledge for
The smart people.
yeah, basically smart people, because most people were actually dumb and were only good at two things: hunting and fucking, or farming and fucking and stuff like that. And the smart people would usually actually end up living longer, so they'd have more knowledge and stuff like that. So yeah. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna talk about is gonna be Spain. Long story short, Spanish boys had some wars with the Muslim boys. It's called the Reconquista, and then the Muslim boys did the same. And then it happens. Wars happen. A lot of stuff. Jihads, crusades, all that good stuff. And we get to the year 1499. It's almost a new century, and in a small city called Herrera. Do you know Spanish?
No, I don't speak a word of Spanish. Wait,
Say that
what?
city. Herrera del Duque.
Oh, Herrera del Duque?
Okay, basically that city. It's a real place. Google it. It's the place where a little girl called Ines Esteban lived. She was 10, and in a dream, she saw sweet baby Jesus. She saw the Messiah himself, and he was like, "Yo, next year I'm coming back, and I'm just gonna deliver all of you." What was that?
He's coming back, boys.
He's coming back, boys and girls. He is back, and yeah, he. Guess what? Everyone found out. Everyone was like, "Yo, this is amazing because we can end up in heaven, right?" And then next year, everyone waited. They got to the date. He's not back.
She's such a liar.
Such a bitch. She's such a liar. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. I'm debating if I read the no what, never mind. I'm just or the OnlyFans. Next time, we'll keep that joke for another time. So she was burned at the stake. Why? Because they liked to burn people back then. But the thing was, the reason why she was burned at the stake, which I think I basically sort of deducted this out of all the research I've done. People weren't really burned for being witches. People were burned for being bad people, for being heretics, which is the different thing. Heretical people are basically people that kind of think, spoiler alert, she did not come yet. They're basically people that did bad things in relation to religion itself, not as much witchcraft. Witchcraft had a different connotation to it. So let's keep talking about it. Let's see what's up. Besides that, so yeah, in most medieval and post-medieval periods, witchcraft was considered to be a felony or a crime, more so than heresy.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a demonic presence. There wasn't really like any type of taints on your taints, if you know what that means. I hope you don't.
There was no talk yet of fornication with the devil.
People did not have sex or anything of the like. It was just, it was just God and the farm. So basically people are just normal, simple people with some knowledge. That was before the like, Reformation, all that stuff. So yeah, you would end up as a witch. You would end up on a noose, not on a stake, so you wouldn't burn. You'd end up with a noose around your neck.
Yeah.
If you would, let's say, for example, bewitch someone's son or a horse. But I think that is personally more boring than getting, being lit on fire, because that is very lit, obviously, because being a heretic is more lit. So the Spanish Inquisition only dealt with heretics, and they could make anyone a heretic. They didn't give a shit. If you were just any random dude that they could, put something on you, they tag you as a heretic. They'd play tag a lot, right?
Yeah, or even if there was like gain to be had from calling someone a witch.
Yeah.
They could do whatever they want.
Obviously. The thing about the Spanish Inquisition, for example, it was like, again, this is very much related. Like, the reason I'm explaining this is because witches weren't at that point still related to religion. So the Inquisition didn't really give a shit about witches. They gave a shit about heresy. So this is to prove a point that witchcraft itself is not a religion, right?
Yeah. It had nothing to do with the devil, yeah.
Exactly.
You were just an annoying person.
Yeah. It's just basically people being either amazing at what they're doing to heal people or just being annoying, like witches and witchcraft practicing people without having anything to do with the religion. Because every religion had their own types of witches, right? So you had nowadays you actually have a religion called Wiccan religion. That's the one religion related to,
and it keeps growing and growing, gets more popular over the years. Even Sephora made a Wiccan starter kit, and then they got backlash from it from the Wicca community, and they had to remove it.
Yeah, basically, it's a very popular thing with the younger people, honestly. And there's a pasta religion. I mean, there is a pasta religion for sure.
Yes.
And also the term Wicca also derives from the Old English word Wicca, I think, which is the word for witches in English, Old English. But yeah, besides that, for example, words are hard. But let me just mention how much life matters, guys. And for that, I will add that even the Inquisition, a couple of decades later, was like, yo, guys, we fucked up.
Yeah.
We fucked up.
They admitted that they fucked up.
They admitted that they fucked up.
And it's bad when one of the biggest
institutions.
Institutions.
Like, it was basically a giant ass organization governed by basically, like, the state had no affairs. Like, the state was like, just go do your thing. And they were so big, and they were like, yo, we fucked up. So, like, honestly, this should give some, like, good light on, like, technically how things progress. This is where people come from when they talk about how religion is shit, right? Like, this is the stuff of nightmares. So let's go next. There's many different types of witches and wizards, mages and such. The word mage comes from an old Zoroastrian word for a cleric, priest. The Magi, you can see them in one of my favorite movies, older movies. It's not very good, but I like it. You can see them in that movie called The Mummy. Maybe some of you have seen it, right?
Long ago.
There's also folk healers. Just most basic witches of all. I guess which could be said it's an umbrella term for this, right? Like, you can put all of these things all under one roof. You could also call them healers as well. Yeah. They're keepers of knowledge. For thousands of years, they have been that. They lived either in solitudes, so they died less from wars and pestilence and stuff like that, or they lived in temples, which are usually well supplied, thus they could live longer. The Spanish Inquisition speaking of the Spanish Inquisition, they did change. Actually, I think we cut this out. So for England, let's ignore the Spanish people because they got their time to shine. The English people had a very specific type of witch. They would be called the cunning folk. I guess, witch also derives from a word in the old language, comes from like the two words themselves come from witcraft, which is like, the craft of witticisms. I don't know, being smart, being a smart motherfucker, right?
Yeah.
And I thought my series is great. There we go. We're burning next. That's fine. I can burn. Words.
Basically, the one who possesses knowledge.
Is a witch. Yes, is a witch. And often these people would be good at specific things, right? They'd be good at herbs, tinctures, making those things, right? The Slavic, which is known as Vedьма, would be basically exactly that. They'd be seers, which the name basically means seers, or the people who possess knowledge. And they would deal with specific things, right? Some witches would deal with some things, some witches would deal with other things. One would deal with exorcisms. One would deal with, let's say, exercising humans, or one would deal with exercising sheep or horses or stuff. Because sometimes people would just be like, "Yo, my horse is like possessed, my dude." And
there's something wrong with your horse, man.
Yeah. And the witch would be like, "You're dumb, but sure, let's do a magical spell." And after that, you sort of, you're fine, right?
Your horse is suddenly gonna be fine.
Yeah, there were many types of these types of witches that dealt with different things, which we will talk about a little bit later as well. There's a very interesting aspect to it, I feel.
Yeah. Just coming back on what Nick was saying about the Spanish Inquisition. Like a few years after that was established, Pope Innocent VIII issued a papal bull, which is basically like an official church document that condemned witchcraft, like we discussed last week as well in the vampire story. It was basically a book that contained combinations of both like fancy tales about witches and also legal arguments against witchcraft. It provided like steps of what you can do, how to identify a witch and a witch's magic. Like it told to people like witches and that they were bad and what you should do and how you know who the fuck is a witch.
Exactly.
And that book that they made about witches is considered to be one of the most dangerous books that was ever made in European history, because of that book and the witch hunts that followed it, over 50,000 people are believed to have died from witch hunts.
That's just the deaths, not the accused, by the way.
Yeah,
just people that actually died, not because a lot were accused.
It's probably accused is much more.
Yeah, 100,000s.
So basically, like, they had no actual ways of knowing who's a witch. There were a lot of different ways of deciding who's a witch and who's not a witch. I'll discuss those later on. But basically, if you were like an annoying person and the Pope had to tell you not to do something, like that one friend that wants to jump off a building when he's drunk, and you've got to be like, hey, don't jump off the building. If the Pope had to be like that, then you're a fucking witch, you know? And if you look into the stories of witchcraft and shit, you realize most of these people were just ordinary people.
Yeah.
Like, they were not witches. They were just like the doctors of today's time, you know? The people that were like, hey, let's dig up a body so we can examine it and get to know how to fix shit.
Yeah.
When someone's sick. But then they were like, oh, you're digging up a body? You must be fornicating with the devil.
Yeah.
So that's basically how it started.
You were fornicating with the devil. Oh, that was good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, they were just like cocky shits. People that were like not smart enough to keep their mouth shut when they should have kept it shut. And then it was like, hey, bitch, you're a witch.
Hey, bitch, you're a witch. Okay, yeah. So that was nice. That was good. Most of the is that the most accused part afterwards? Okay, yeah. So most of the yakuza, sorry,
you can talk
Japanese. What? They were just cocky shits and were cocky pissy shits, and they probably often be Aquariuses because we all know Aquariuses are like that. So they didn't understand that the consequences of being accused would often lead to people investigating them and then probably going on the guillotine. Often they'd be denounced. Right? They'd be denounced. So not everyone was a witch, but people would be denounced because sometimes your neighbor just hated your guts. Sadly. And I can actually talk about this because we had a very similar situation here, but it's not related to religion and witchcraft as much, but it's the same sort of psychological aspect of it. Where in the USSR, I have actual legit knowledge on this. Please believe me. I have studied this actual aspect through scholarly books, manuals, lawyers type shit, right? Since I did study law a little bit there, right? And the thing is, during the USSR, when they occupied Eastern Europe, they basically, at one point, Stalin was like, yo, let's send all the evil people, which is kind of like his own way of saying witches, but he couldn't say witches because that became a religious thing. So he said, let's just send them all to Siberia, to the gulags, right? And that would usually involve, why they did this was because they wanted their lands, their treasures, everything they had, so they could redistribute everything, right? But the thing was, often people would end up going there if they were denounced by their neighbors, by their family members, by people they loved, hated, doesn't matter, just because people work like that, right? Like, we want to get someone else's riches. What do? You say he's a witch, or you say he's a kulak, which is a thing that Stalin didn't like. People with money.
What?
A kulak, which means fist, but also it's a term for people that were like, usually, if you imagine most peasants that had actual resources, they'd be hated. So that's how it sort of ended up happening in the Middle Ages with the witches as well. People would just be denounced by people that didn't like them, and that sort of stuff. And like, out of my memory right now, we looked into some cases which are, trust me, crazy motherfucking cases that just like boggle your mind how insane they are. There was this one case with did you actually add this one, or can I talk about this?
No,
the one about Scotland and the Queen. So there was basically a moment where the King of Scotland marries the Queen of Norway, Denmark. You guys, like history nerds, know about the Kalmar Union, all that stuff, right? So he marries the Queen of Norway, basically a daughter of one of those kings, right? Whatever, it doesn't matter. And she's coming over to Scotland, and apparently, like, there was a giant storm supposed to make her not arrive there. She arrives, but then the king's like, yo, there might have been witches doing this stuff, because witches would often be also attributed the fact that they'd work with natural stuff, like, right, like water, air, like earth stuff, like elements of nature, right?
There was a big storm at sea. There must have been witches.
Obviously had to been witches, and one of the persons was like involved, like that was not involved, but was said to have been involved by someone who denounced her. I forget the name, but you can Google it. Scottish king, you'll find it. The not too hard to find. And basically, what ends up happening is the person gets accused, goes on like the guillotine, dies. Why? Because someone said they were a witch.
She did it.
Exactly. That's how witch hunts start most of the time. It's like, you just need one person to say it. Just like last time we talked about vampires, you need one single case, and then everyone is like, oh my god, let's blame everything on them.
My neighbor is a vampire. And now it's my neighbor is a witch.
Exactly. 100 years later, it's my neighbor is a witch. Yeah. Another place heavily influenced by witch hunts in Europe that isn't very much talked about, like Salem or other places like that, or any place in Europe or Africa, is Finland, where charges against at least 2,000 people were made between 1520 and 1750, out of which most were men, not women, surprisingly. And this is often, yeah, right. It's most of the time you think it's a woman, which is a complete bullshit. It's like witches were men and women.
Yes.
Usually, like in the older period of their life, right? Like that's what it was considered. And
but they also said that older people were witches just to get rid of them.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the interesting part is that there was a bishop in a city called Turku, which was a big city in Finland at most points, I think, where many of these cases happened, the 2,000 cases. And funny thing, this bishop was not to blame. Like, the religious aspect of this was not the problematic one. It was actually a judge from this island of Åland, I think it's called in English, probably. Can you turn up cut? Can you just go to her screen for now? I think she'll be just go here. Let's go there.
Hi.
Hi. And the city of Åland, basically, there was a panic there. It's a city on an island, and there a panic there because of a judge that was recently appointed. So the judge was Finnish, that studied in a Swedish university built in Estonia with German teachers. Again, always it has to be the Germans.
Always the Germans.
When like the Germans were like, yo, we don't like you Southerners, and then we're like, Christ came. Every German was like, we are now the Crusaders, yes. And they went and like tried to not colonize, like Christianize everyone. So by some chance, besides his law classes, also had German witchcraft studies. That was like the peak moment of the like witchcrafts, like whole industry, like the demonic became a thing. Like before that, it wasn't a thing. After the Reformation, this was around that period, right? Like it became a huge thing, a giant thing. So
suddenly it has to do with demons.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the malefic became a thing. Before that, it wasn't as much. So the reason I mentioned the fact that there were a lot of men as well is because in Eastern Orthodox countries, witchcraft isn't always viewed as a thing done by women. Often, like, men would also be victims of this specific, condemnation. One sec.
So basically, if your husband was a little shit, you could just say, "Hey, he's a fucking witch. Get rid of him."
Exactly. Yeah. If you didn't like someone, you could just get rid of them like that. A lot of those cases were basically that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and in some countries, even today, witchcraft is still an actual thing. People still believe it, and I think absolutely. Saudi Arabia is the only country right now where you still have a death penalty for witchcraft. Yep. Which is like mind blowing that they still believe in it.
Good point. They have voodoo in the Caribbean still.
Yeah, voodoo is also
basically the same shamanism in some places, right? It's a little bit different, but it's still in the same vein, though. So yeah. Also, apparently, there were different parts of witchcraft that weren't seen as maleficent studies, right? So some things were, some things weren't. Apparently, astrology was part of it, and most astrologers would end up being like, generally speaking, elevated because people, kings and such, like important people, didn't see this as a bad thing, but it was originally part of the witchcraft stuff, right? Like they would have been seen as, like, they would have almost the same knowledge as most general, witches, because you sort of, that's part of the sciences back then. So you could also be a doctor for a king besides that. Like some witches, instead of becoming, like, this is why you have this change where doctors sort of become a thing as well, is because sometimes those people would be hired by kings. For example, you'd have a healer that would tend to the king's medical needs, like tasting their urine to see if it tasted too sweet, because that's how people actually find out if your diet is good. That's why they found if
that being your job, you have to taste the king's pee.
Yeah, you have to taste the king's pee. This is legit stuff, by the way. I'm not making this up. You'd have to taste the king's pee in order to see if he had diabetes or shit like that, because sometimes you'd have the change in like taste because of too much sugar and stuff like that in the urine and stuff. So Finland, we were talking about Finland. Finland at the time was also an integral part of the Swedish kingdom that stretched all over the Baltic states. I saw that. I read that. North Germany was part of it. A big chunk of Baltic states, most of Scandinavia. So you can also follow these to be very much related to the new laws and the papal edicts passed in regards to diabolical and maleficent arts, which became a thing more around the Age of Reformation, right? So these are a lot, like a lot of this stuff is related to religion itself, but then again, it does have a distinct thing between a heresy and witchcraft at this point. Like, it's not still the same thing, right? It's still different. So from a legal standpoint, in England in 1542, practicing witchcraft, is this still mine, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, practicing witchcraft was a felony that led to death sentence by hanging. Again, hanging, not burning at the stake. In 1563, there was a new act, a second act, which made felony to invoke evil spirits. So basically, you couldn't summon Satan or demons or shit like that, right?
Darn it.
Yeah, right? You
just gonna summon him for a brunch.
I kind of want to go. I'm kind of a godly man, but I wouldn't mind.
That would be interesting,
Interesting discussion, right? Also, third act, made in 1604, it added upon the second one and made it a felony to bewitch people, besides killing them, to bewitch people, or to bring injury upon them or any of their property. Yes, they had this idea of property. It was made a felony to dig up bodies, right? Or to feed or consult spirits, because in some parts they would feed spirits in order to have them be more lenient to them, to be nicer to them and shit like that, right?
Nice.
So yeah, but scholars like didn't really care for all of this stuff. In different parts, it was different stuff. Like in some places they would dig up bodies, in some places they would study dead bodies. As much as the Pope thought he'd change some shit, he didn't change jack shit. So
basically, if you were a doctor wanting to dig up bodies, you were fucked.
You were fucked.
But like that was the only way they could get to know the human body. You know?
They could use bodies, exactly, but it wasn't very much allowed. So so funny thing was, the church denounced witchcraft later on, right? Like 1700s. What do you guys think? What do you guys think it happened? Because, Katha, why would you say that the church denounced the practice of witchcraft?
Well,
What's your opinion on it?
Everything that isn't to do with God and loving God is bad, according to the church back then.
Yep.
Like, you need to love fucking Jesus,
It's not because it's evil, but it's because Jesus himself didn't practice it. So if the church doesn't use this, or this doesn't uses the church somehow, that means it's not related to the church. That means it's not good. That means it's evil. So this is also the time when witchcraft actually sort of starts to take form in a more modern way. Like you sort of see witches become more of a summoning type demon type shit where you have Satan being summoned by...
The church made it evil.
Yeah, the church needed evil, so they made it evil. Because before then, demons, the way that you see them and know them now, were not a thing. They were basically... the demons we have today are basically those creatures that, fairies, angels, I don't know, any types of mythical creatures that weren't Christian. So they basically took them and they made them Christian. How? They made them evil Christian. They made them demons. They had a couple of horns. They strapped a few more on them. They put a couple of bat wings because bats were fucking scary. Yeah, put a horn on it. Make it horny.
No.
Yeah.
Everything horny is bad,
Absolutely. Fucking be a prude or don't. All right. Witchcraft is itself an ancient art. And yeah. It's not the same as it is in movies where they summon Satan by having intercourse with a beautiful virgin woman on a pentagram drawn with the blood of her brother while slashing a goat's throat over her.
Let's summon the demon.
Right? Yeah. Also, thank you to the movies Midsommar and Suspiria. Actually, I would recommend both of them, but only if you have actual, if you don't barf instantly, because God, those movies are horrible. Nam can agree with me, I think, on that. Midsommar is horrible. Suspiria, I would highly recommend not watching if you're just scared of stuff, because that one is bad.
Is it scary or is it gory?
It's just horrible. It's horny. There's a lot of stuff in there. Let's put it that way. And I'll never forget the mindfuck involved, though. I love those, but my nightmares love them even more. So witchcraft dealt with everything scientific, herbalism, medicine, astrology. Yes, astrology. Don't at me. It was considered science back then. So yeah. You wanna add the thing there? The one thing that...
yeah. Basically, when we're talking about astrology, I think everyone that knows Nyx knows he's very much into astrology. So basically, back in the day, you would have been considered a witch.
No? A witch, and
how does that make you feel, that your love for astrology was such a
I would definitely be one of those top tier bitches. I mean witches. I'd serve like a king. I'd be like, yo, motherfucker, let's get your horoscope done. And,
yo, bitch, I'm coming to read your horoscope.
I'd fake it all. Just to get into the good graces of the king.
You would say look, your future is so prosperous.
Yeah,
you're gonna be great.
I'm here to check pee.
Yeah. Basically, he would use astrology to get in the good graces of the king to then taste his pee.
Astrologers and horoscopes, or astrologers and planets? Both, because they have to deal with both. The horoscopes are a part of astrology. They're not as simple as they make it seem on TVs, but whatever. This is not astrology. We'll talk astrology on the next podcast or another one. Doesn't matter. So yeah, as well, great horror stories and evil in the world, just like those two movies written by men, by the way. So have men given witchcraft a bad reputation, by the way. Most modern accounts suggest that it was male surgeons and coroners that occupied... Also, my eyes are, I want to say bleeding, but they're just black.
Imagine if your eyes started bleeding right now.
That would be very funny, yeah.
Demons! Witchcraft! Witchcraft!
They occupied government positions that were doing things more superstitious people couldn't understand without blaming it on witches and practice of witchcraft. So people, people being people, you'd basically burn him. Please don't, not just yet. Let me finish the story. So witches would rarely make pacts with the devil back in the day, compared to how much how much of that and sex and kink there is in today's world when showcasing witches. Before, there was barely any type of intercourse, and there was no flying on brooms, right? That was not a thing. They did have familiars, though, which are basically pets. They were like cats, toads, owls, ravens, and even lambs in some cases. Basically, you found an animal that liked you enough. Congrats, that's your thing. It's like you like, I don't know, what's a weird pet to have as a familiar?
A bee.
Like a bee. That would be annoying because as soon as it stings someone, it dies. And it'd be like, no, my familiar.
Oh no, shit, they died.
She lived 5 days. Oh no.
Imagine a fly.
Okay, so what else? Yeah, in many parts, witches would be hanged for their crimes, not burned. Right? We've mentioned that many times at this point. I just want you guys to understand. It was one thing before. It was one thing after.
It really changed through the years.
Yeah, it changed through the years.
In the beginning, it was just hanging.
Yeah, in the beginning, it was just hanging because it was considered a what's it called? Like a platypus familiar as well. Yeah, it was considered a felony, so it was basically a crime. You did a big bad, right? But you weren't a heretic just yet, right? Not always. So that honor was kept for people like the Cathars in south of France, who are basically a bunch of commies that thought life was pain and you shouldn't make kids because that's bad. Funny because and then they still got fucked by the crusade, and that was meant to eradicate their whole thing. I'm not shitting on commies, just saying, but it's it's a little bit familiar, just Witch hunts were very rare and sporadic, by the way, before the Reformation. Like, they didn't really have those back in the day. And there was a couple of famous witch hunts and witch hunters. One of which was the witch hunter Matthew Hopkins. See what I did there? Matthew Hopkins from England. He was in it for money and for power. And his witch hunts were active during the English Civil War. So if you ever play Europa Universalis and you see the English Civil War, that's when this dude approximately was active, right?
Okay.
So he you know the English Civil War, where the king was a little bitch and couldn't lead the country, but he still somehow managed to rule because there were so many people that loved him so much. Like, even when he lost the war, people were like, just put him back, he's fine, he's good. And yeah, so for them it was normal to be ruled by a king, right? It was something normal. Even when the king was an overgrown baby with no understanding of how to lead a country. The reason I mention this is to let you understand what weird and fucked up times those were. Why exactly Matthew Hopkins proclaimed he held the office of witch finder, general.
Witch finder, yeah.
So there was so much, everything was so disabled that he basically had, he was just like, yo guys, I'm the witch finder general.
I'm the boss of the witch.
And everyone was like, no, you're not. And he was like, fuck you, and just killed people because he was literally.
Fuck you.
He was
what I want.
So much power. Yeah, he was given so much power that he just did whatever the fuck he wanted. The parliament never accepted that, but he did it still for money as well. Yes, most of this was done for money. Actually, sadly, it's always money. It's always capitalism. So Matthew Hopkins, Google him. Very interesting person. Fucked up in a fucked up way though. So the thing about him is though he made it.
He made it.
He was solely he didn't made it, but he was solely responsible for it. He made afterwards, which was more executions in 4 years in which he was active than in the previous 160 years. So in 160 years, there was I don't know, maybe a couple of hundred people died, and in 4 years, the motherfucker basically ended up killing thousands of people. So
he's a bad boy.
Yeah, he took a lot of money for it as well because he was a bastard. He took them to the gallows as well. No fire yet. Keep that in mind. No fire.
No fire yet. Okay.
Yep, not yet.
When did the fire start?
That kind of later. I think the fire sort of started in different places in different times. Although in England they didn't really start then. In England they lasted for a little bit, not that much.
Was it mainly in America then the fires?
No, I think the fires were a little bit American thing because America wasn't only English people, but it was also in Europe, and there's a reason for continental Europe, that is. But yeah, also witchcraft was usually considered just witchcraft. Evil only whenever there was a new type of religious turmoil, right? When there was something bad in the world, that's when witchcraft became bad.
Witchcraft.
Yeah, that's why it has this bad connotation, right? Most witch trials in England happened on 2 occasions during Matthew Hopkins's witch hunts and during Elizabeth I, which reigned during a big change in Europe, which was big religious change, Protestants versus Catholics versus everyone else in between, every motherfucker that was yo, let's make our own religion, fuck it.
Gonna start the flying pasta religion.
We also I need to mention this again. Witchcraft itself is not a religion. witchcraft can be part of any religion. You can be a witch of a Catholic witch, a Muslim witch. I don't know. Those probably don't really exist. They killed them pretty fast, I think.
Yeah.
You can be like a shaman. You can be like a voodoo witch, stuff like that, right? Depends on different places, different religions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not. It's in that there is also the different types of witches that you have.
Yeah. Where do we have the different types of witches?
A bit lower. You have the water witches, the green witches, the hedge witches, the kitchen witches.
Okay, yeah. So we have the practice today is mostly one that relies on science, but with the flair of magical, which is like kind of BS. But I guess if you want to think of it that way, sure, go for it. As long as it doesn't harm anyone. It uses knowledge of botany to grow plants and enhance spells. To take it as you will, but it basically is a hobby with a color name, right? It's just like whatever. It's just like you're a botanist, but you also think botany is kind of lame, so you just
you love plants, so you call yourself
yeah, you're sort of like an emo kid. You're sort of like an emo kid that was like, yo, I kind of want to do something cool, but just like botany is lame, and just like I want to have cool shit with me, cool hats and stuff. So like witchcraft, let's go. So the thing about it is, this is like a more modern thing we're talking about, right? At this point, they basically do it as a hobby, modern witches, and there's many types. There's water witches, green witches, hedge witches, kitchen witches, and many more. For example, water witches would work with sources that they take from trinkets or from water sources like oceans, rivers, and such. Kitchen witches are the ones that create potion and enhance foods with the supernatural spells and such. Again, don't ask me how that works. There's a lot of that stuff on Google, but it's basically as basic as that, right? You can, but these people are generally like super like chill. I was slightly disappointed people. By how nice they are. Like I expected witches to be like
they just want peace and harmony in all the elements.
Yeah, they just want to chill. They just want to be part of the world, right? Do some magic, whatever that means. Yes, kitchen witches, alchemy. It's called kitchen witches, surprisingly. My mom's a kitchen witch. I don't want to. It's an actual thing. Look it up. It's pretty interesting, actually. Yeah. And you have, they're pretty harmless. Like they talk about how modern witchcraft doesn't really have to do with like super bad stuff. Like generally, they kind of look away. Like they're against stuff that is harmful. And like the Maleficent, that's what it's called, Maleficent witchcraft. They're not with it. They're against it, and it's like the type of stuff that would make people, either fall in love with you or like hunt other people or kill them and stuff like that. That's the bad part. They don't like that. Most of them, at least. I'm assuming. I added this. I assume to say there's a lot of elements involved with this, and I'm assuming a lava or radiation, which wouldn't be very healthy for you, because everything else seems super healthy. And now to add some famous witch hunts. The ones that I mentioned are just like, these are just the top,
the most famous ones.
Yeah, some of the more famous ones.
Like everyone heard of the Salem witch trials.
Exactly, Salem witch trials. From basically the years, I fucked up here, it's 1693. So the years are 1692, 1693, Massachusetts, USA. 19 were executed. Only 19. I thought it would be more. Honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed.
With how famous it is, you would think a lot more were killed.
So much about it. So much about it. Next one. One that has almost 81 more dead. The Moravian or Czech witch trials. In 1622 until 1696. That took a while, right? Those had almost over 100 dead. Yeah, that's a lot.
Over all those years, though, it's not that much.
I guess. The Valais witch trials, which is part of like the Kingdom of Burgundy, but that's also basically in like Switzerland, but also like it was part of France at one point. So just like in that general area.
Yeah.
For the year is 1428. This is actually one of the first witch hunts and witch trials that has happened. Had hundreds of people dead in that area, which is crazy too. It's like I didn't think the Swiss would be that kind of people. I thought they liked money and chocolate, not killing witches on burning them at stake.
The more you know.
The more you know. Like what are the Swiss famous for? For swatch and switches and witches. Swatches and switches and witches, yeah. The Swiss held interesting. So the Basque witch trials. which are apparently one of the most famous or infamous in this case witch trials and executions. Happened during the started during 1609. So it started in 1609, 1609, in Navarra, in Spain, where 7,000 people were accused and killed, out of which mostly were actually killed. Like there was a fuck ton of people dead there. This is also part of why we talked about so much about the Spanish Inquisition. This was the part where they actually started burning people for, like at the very end, right?
Yeah.
Burning people for heresy that were accused of also being, witches and stuff. It had a big impact. Like the religious aspect of it had a giant impact. So let's go.
Surprisingly, also I read something about like at a certain point, like 20 plus villages in Germany, I think, were like there were witch hunts there, and a lot of people were killed there as well. But I've never heard of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of these types of
like with how popular Salem witch trials is in today's culture and like movies and everything. Like you would think there would be more deaths there. But if we're talking about witchcraft, like honestly, it's a crime persecuted with no actual evidence or of guilt. Like they just say, hey, this bitch is a witch. They couldn't prove anything. And the only requirement to accuse someone and to kill them was a confession from the person that was accused of being a witch. Yep. But they wouldn't go about it nicely, Yep. They would torture and torture and torture until you couldn't handle it anymore. It would just be like, yes, fuck, I'm a witch. I confess, I'm a witch.
Yes, fuck, daddy, I'm a witch.
Fuck, daddy, I'm a witch. No, but they would just confess to being a witch when they're obviously not a witch, just to get out of the pain and suffering.
They still do that today. They still do that today with like prisons and stuff. Like people just say they're at fault even if they're not. They're guilty.
Yeah, they just say, yes, fuck, I did it. Because you just want pain to end and the suffering to end. So they would just like torture people. They would deprive people of sleep. So they would go crazy. They would attempt drowning. They would bind people in a witch's bridle, which is like a contraption around your head and that like pushes your tongue either up against the roof of your mouth or down, so you would be in pain. They would strangulate you. They would do finger and hand torture. Like, they would do anything to get a confession out of someone of being like, yeah, fuck, I'm a witch. Confess. But there were some other interesting ways of like getting to know who the witch is. So obviously there were the husbands who were like, my wife is sleeping with the devil.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Because they suspect their wife has been committing adultery with the devil. I don't fucking know. Like, how do you decide that? I don't know. Or there's
a lot of fucked up shit.
Yeah. There was a case where a minister of a certain area, I don't know, instructed two young boys to perform a simple test. The boys had to stand at the entrance of a church and they had to point at the people walking through the church's doors if they could see. They apparently could see who had an alliance with the devil by an invisible mark on their forehead. Yeah, sure, these kids can see it.
I mean, it's always kids though. Like with the vampires, it was like you needed to have a pure virgin kid to ride a black horse to spot the vampires.
Maybe these kids were virgins, probably. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe that's the power.
The funny thing is though, so it was a minister that got the kids to do it. The funny thing is those kids pointed at his wife. That she was fornicating with the devil.
Oh no. From now on, whenever someone does something dumb, I'll just say, oh no, they're fornicating with the devil.
You're fornicating with the devil, bitch. So basically, the minister guy quickly sushed that. He was like, no, you're wrong here. You're not my wife. Nuh-uh. Clearly, you don't know what you're talking about. With everyone else, you're completely right, but not with my wife. I guess he loved his wife. Hey, fine, someone that loves his wife.
Maybe he just wanted to have sex with someone that had sex with the devil.
Yeah, maybe he was into that. Maybe that was his kink.
That was a kink, maybe.
Yeah. In Sweden, in Swedish trials, they wouldn't go to abuse the person that's accused of being a witch. They would abuse kids. So the kids would be threatened and abused, so they could accuse people from their community of being a witch. They would just abuse the kids, so the kids would say, my uncle is a witch.
Oh no!
Oh no, Uncle, what are you doing?
Oh no! Wait, that one kind of sad.
Like they would just torture the kids, so the kids would like claim someone in their community is a witch or warlock or whatever. If someone had doubt that a certain woman was a witch, they would tie her up and throw her into a well. And if that woman sank to the bottom of the well, all doubts would be rejected. Oh shit, that person wasn't a witch. Guess she's dead now. Oopsie. Sucks to be you. Yep. Because they believe that witches can't sink. So if you floated, if you knew how to swim, and you went up to the top of the water to get some air, they would be like, "Oh, fuck, kill her. She's a witch. She's not sinking." They would then burn her body and make sure she can't come back from the dead, you know, because she's
if she dies and she's not a witch, she's going to heaven. But if she's a witch, might as well kill her. Huh?
If she died, oops, I guess she's in heaven now.
Situation.
And yeah, and when they in some cases when they killed someone that they thought was a witch, they would place her head where her feet are normally when she's asleep, because they believed witches' soul leave their bodies in form of a night butterfly, a cat or a frog or whatever, and the witch can't do that if she is not in her normal sleeping position, you know. If she's placed differently.
I think people secretly had a kink for this. Like people had a kink of seeing other people like suck their peepees or
BJs. They would just put their head.
With the vampires, it's the same thing.
Yeah, they also did that with vampires.
Like put their head, like he cut off the head though. He cut off the head and put it between their legs, so the vampires can't like rise from the dead.
Yeah. So basically, there were a lot of ways to find out who's the witch. Could almost be like a TV show. Who's the witch?
We should make a TV show and be like, who is fornicating with the devil? Find out today on Mythical Bloody OwO's.
Yeah, Mythical Bloody OwO's. So yeah, that's basically what I had to tell about witchcraft.
Surprisingly, we went through this much faster than I thought.
Yeah, at least this time we...
How much did it take?
50 minutes, almost.
15?
50.
50. I was like, if you said 15...
No, it's been longer than 15. Maybe let's come back on a question that I saw in chat.
Sure. So, also, yeah, the grand prize for this is a hot bath in a well.
Ooh. So Marsupilami Merb asked, can you ask Nyx if it would be a good idea to implement the witch trials and the situation into EU4 and give nations penalties if they don't deal with the problem?
Oh shit, that's actually good. I think anything related to witchcraft is super fun because it's like just seeing how dumb people are and how much panic there is. Like most of the reasons like witchcraft became a bad thing was because panic. It's always panic.
Yeah,
like,
always panic.
Only really says like, fuck this. Same with vampires. It was a panic. People started digging up bodies. That's where the Pope was like, "Stop! Come on, guys! Stop! Please don't do that!
Don't dig up the bodies!" But also, like I think, like things in nature, like that happen, like droughts and big storms. They used to blame it on vampires. Now they blame it on witches.
Oh my god, that's a cat.
It's a cat. It's a cat.
Oh my god.
And it's a doggy.
Is it your familiar? Is that your familiar?
Yeah, that's my familiar.
If you were a witch, the cat is your familiar.
It's a turtle. And like
oh, turtles, by the way, turtles apparently were familiars.
Yeah, see, I trolled the system by calling my cat Turtle. So now it's really
like, oh, she has to be a witch, but then it's like a cat, and they're like, oh, wait, but she's not a witch, but the cat is also black, so it's like, is she a witch? Is she not?
Maybe I'm a witch, guys. Maybe I just turned my hair purple.
But you have a dog as well. Dogs are like super nice and cute, so you can be a witch now.
Yeah, I can't be a witch. I have 2 dogs. But then I have 3 cats, so what is it? What is it?
But there's more dog than cat because the dogs are bigger, so...
Yeah, true. Well, it's not a black cat, actually. She's grey. She's like striped. But yeah. Any other things that want to be mentioned? We should
burn or drown cats out. So out of this, you guys still didn't get it. If it's before the Reformation, you have to drown her. If it's after the Reformation, you have to burn and drown her.
Yeah. You have to like double it up.
You have to take 2 steps.
Just killing me isn't enough, boys. You need to put me on fire.
That witch is on fire.
Fire!
See, I knew it. For once, the song actually fits very well. Don't forget the weight measurement they did. Yeah, there was like a measurement to see how if they were a witch. So basically, they'd put them on top of like a plank, and they'd put something very thin, like small on the other side. So if they floated, if they were a witch, they'd basically float, right? But if they weren't, they'd fall down because normal people are kind of heavier. But if they were a witch, they'd be super light, right? So they wouldn't fall off the plank, even when the other side had only like a feather on it or something.
Jesus, that's weird. Witches are made of wood.
Obviously.
Totally. Right. Yeah, I think that was it for this week's podcast.
Sorry, I have to add this one. I think if you're a witch and I will put you in a fire, it's the wrong move because you fornicated with the devil, and thus the fire is his domain, the devil's domain. So he will just come to help you. See, the witches are smart. They're like, don't burn us. But secretly they're like,
I'm screaming. This hurts. Satan, hi.
I guess. Yeah, this was this week's thing. I hope you learned some things. I hope you
guys found it interesting to hear us discuss witches.
Yeah.
And vampires last week.
Vampires last week.
Yeah, and what will it be
next? You guys
want
to recommend anything for next week?
Yeah, you guys are free to recommend any stories or any interesting myths or legends. And we'll do our research and we'll come back on it next week.
Suggest shit in Discord. Tell us, what do you want?
Slide into our DMs.
Slide into our DMs and tell me what to do stuff.
I learned that Nix is about Indo.
Yeah, sending the witch to help see their boyfriend. That's basically what you're doing when you burn.
Yeah, exactly, Nam.
I learned that Nix is a well-endowed blonde girl. There you go.
Universum?
No, fuck that.
What?
But yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much. And yeah, that was today's episode. It will be uploaded on YouTube in a few days when I've had time to do it. And then yeah, we'll be back next week with more.